Been together so long we can't pretend. Remember the way we used to move, dance all night like young lovers do. Your heart is changing. Now we don't dance like we used to. Silent disco on the floor, baby. Mr. DJ, he'll get me through. When the beat's gone, you can't save me, baby. Smoke and mirrors, pretty lights. Another runaway city boy getting too high. But boys like you tell pretty lies at 5 a.m.
This is Broad Radio. For you, by you. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Good morning and welcome to Broad Radio. I'm Jo Stanley and I'm so happy that our co-host today is the beautiful Shelley Ware. Hi, Shelley.
Hello. How are you?
Oh, darling, I have to tell you, I felt a little bit, I'm exhausted, as most people are, and a little flat this morning, and then I saw your beautiful face and I instantly felt better.
Oh, isn't that lovely? I felt the same when I walked into this amazing studio and saw all your gorgeous faces. I was like, oh, isn't this beautiful?
Oh, well, welcome everybody if you're joining us live on Facebook or YouTube. Do share if you would like to share your comments or questions along the way. We really welcome you to our Broad Radio community. And if you are catching up with any of our previous episodes, you can do that wherever you get your podcasts with Broad Radio on the go. And we would love you to, I don't know, hit us up with a review or a rating. That would really help us.
They're very helpful, actually, yeah. So make sure you do that for us.
Yeah, that's right. And share it with your community. That would be awesome. We have a really awesome show coming up today. 3 amazing conversations. We're going to be joined by Janice Goudie, who inspired one of the characters in Come From Away, which is this gorgeous musical that is a very emotional musical. It's about this tiny Canadian town called Gander where all of the planes were diverted on 9/11, and Janice inspired one of the characters in this musical, so we're going to be talking with her first up. Then Melissa Leong, one of the amazing judges from Masterchef, an incredibly strong, independent, wonderful woman with impeccable fashion. She's going to be joining us. And also at the end of the show, we're going to be joined by Bel Smith, who is from a wonderful organisation called, let me get it right, The Root Cause. She's going to help us feed our kids.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
need that help. Thank you, Belle.
We really do. I really do need that help. So, yes, I wanted to just share this with you, Shell. I don't know if you've heard of Lip Timber.
I've heard of Liptember and I've purchased some lipstick to participate, but tell me more.
Well, Lip Timber is a wonderful foundation. Actually, they support Gene House for Women's Health, and I know that you're an ambassador for Gene House. They do incredible work for women's health across the board. Lip Timber is all about women's mental health, and they have just released a fantastic, like one of the best research papers I have seen. It's called The Mental Health Gender Gap. Understanding Women's Mental Health in Australia. And I wanted to share this with you because I believe that at the moment, just reading the room even today with the women who are here in our own team, I think that I'm surrounded by women who are exhausted, overwhelmed, who feel a little bit like we're drowning.
Yeah, there are certainly days like that, absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to share this research because it reflects a lot of what we're feeling, right? So it's nice to know we're not alone.
Yeah, it is nice to know, and that we're here together, that we can talk through this and work it through together, that we're not alone.
Absolutely. So the research shows, how's this? 1 in 2 women, 1 in 2 in Australia are currently experiencing mental health challenges, right? To the point where they would describe it as mental ill health, okay?
Wow.
1 in 2.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It's
And
a lot.
that's actually quite mind blowing, to be honest. You think of your cohort of girlfriends, and you think, hang on a minute, that's a lot of my friends that could be unwell. And we're not talking about it.
That's right. But when you look at the top three, the first one is stress from just all of life's pressures, right?
Yep.
So bing. Anxiety from all of life's pressures, bing.
Yeah.
And the third one is body image.
Yeah.
So of course it's 1 in 2.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense. I've got 2 of them.
Well, that's right. So then you go, okay, I had actually, when I hear mental illness or whatever, mental ill health, I've gone, oh, that's not me.
Yes.
But then when you look at those 3, you go, actually, that is me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they drill down again, 48% of us are not getting help.
That's hard. That's hard to hear.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And the reasons they list that we're not getting help, not realising the importance of mental health support so often, not having time,
Yes.
cost, and the stigma or embarrassment and shame around that. So all of those things that just makes me go, I wanted to say today, firstly, you are worthy of prioritising your health and your mental health, right?
Absolutely, and it goes back to that thing: if you're not well, you can't look after the people you love, because and then you can't keep them well. So you've got to be well. You've got to have that priority of looking after yourself. And I've learnt that through being an ambassador at Jean Hales, because I used to just go, and I can still do it at times. But if I don't stop and look after myself and make sure I'm well, then I can't look after my family or my loved ones.
Absolutely. And I think that, and I actually spoke about this with our producer Beck this morning, that as women we absorb and we just take on more and more and more, and we just think we'll just keep going. And it's just not sustainable.
It's not.
And you do get to a point where some days you wake up and you think, I just want to cry and I don't know why. And I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. Yep. Or driving along and a song comes on, next minute you're bowling.
Oh my God.
Don't think you're not alone there. I'm trying to.
Oh my God, the car cries, I can't even tell you how. And then there's the shower cries, there's on the toilet cries, there's walking the dog cries.
Yeah, thank goodness for those cries though, because it's another way to get it out. But seeking that extra help and listening to yourself and your mind and your heart and what you need is so important to get that extra help if you need it.
Yeah. And sometimes the help is just going for coffee with your girlfriend and saying, I really just want to have a park cry with your girlfriend.
With my girlfriend.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that because I think it's a really important conversation, and I want to empower you. If today you are feeling really a bit flat, that's okay. It's normal, and there's no shame, there's no stigma. And seek the help, whatever that looks like for you. Yeah. It's really important.
And sometimes it's just a phone call, like you said, or, sitting in the park with a girlfriend, and sometimes you need a little bit more, and there's no shame in any of it.
Yes. And, for me, I really love therapy, right?
I duck in and out. I quite like it too.
Yes. I've had a lot of therapists over the time, 8 in my lifetime. Okay. I didn't break them. They were a lot of them retired.
They give you different things. So sometimes if that therapist isn't giving you the right thing, then it's important to change to another therapist.
That's right. But I also want to acknowledge that there's a bit of a backlog for therapy at the moment.
It's difficult.
And it is expensive. But if you can get along to your GP and get a mental health plan, and hopefully you can get in to see someone, because that can be hard.
Yeah, it can be very difficult, especially with the backlog of COVID. But if you also make that time to find other people that can support you in the meantime, that's really valuable.
Yeah. And go for a walk in the sunshine if it's there. So, let's get to our first guest. I'm hoping that she's there. Yes, I'm getting the thumbs up. So, Come From Away is a beautiful musical that tells the true story of the small Canadian town Gander, where dozens of international flights were diverted on 9/11. It is a tale of some of the people who were on that flight, but also the extraordinary townspeople who welcomed them. And one of the characters is intern journalist Janice Moser, and the real-life Janice is joining us now. Janice Goudie. Hello, Janice.
Good morning. How are you?
I am sure that you've told this story 1,000 times, but it is really quite extraordinary, your perspective around that incredibly momentous day on the world, world history really was made, of course. Can you share your experiences and your memories of that morning of 9/11 in Gander?
Well, it was my first week on the job. I had just moved to town that weekend, started work on Monday, and then 9/11 happened on Tuesday. And we saw 38 planes land in a little sleepy town of Gander, which, the airport was always an important factor to the community. But when the community almost doubled in size with all the passengers that landed, and they ended up being there for 4 and 5 days, it was a surreal experience for sure.
And that moment when the planes did land and to Gander, and it blows my mind because that moment in 9/11 was so different for so many other people, but your experience is completely different. Not there's trauma in your experience, but there's also a joy of kindness and caring that happened in Gander. What's so special about the people of Gander in this moment?
The Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. I think really what it was is we opened our doors to the people, and there were strangers going into people's homes and having showers and staying all night. And it was just whatever the people of the community could do for the folks who had landed, it was being done.
But I mean, the population swelled by how many?
It was a little over 7,000 people, and there was about 9,500 people who lived there at the time.
That
So we
see,
literally pretty well doubled.
Oh,
Yeah.
but how even is the infrastructure and,
yeah.
even supplies and whatever you might have had in the town surely was limited.
Yes. And so all the students got dismissed from school, and the schools got turned into makeshift hotels. Any organization that had space in their buildings, they were asked to take in people. And that's why really people in the community started taking people in too, because you had to really put them wherever you could find a place. And they were also bused about 20, 30 minutes away to other towns that were nearby in the region. So everyone just came together and did what they had to do. And there were stores that were donating, toothbrushes, underwear, you name it. It had to be donated because all the people who were on the planes couldn't take their luggage off. So they had nothing.
Wow.
And in that time, did you even know, or how long till you knew why those planes were landing?
Well, we probably knew before some of the passengers on the flights even knew. We found out around lunchtime when we saw it on the news of the tragedy of the Twin Towers, and saw the planes going into the buildings there. There were people who were on the flights who had not heard the news, and some of them had been on those planes for up to 24 hours and didn't know until they came off why they were in Gander. But everyone came together and tried to comfort those who were dealing with the loss of loved ones, or not knowing where they were, or really where they were in the world, because there were people who had no idea where Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada was.
And have people maintained connections with the people on those flights over the years?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many friendships that have been forged. People have come back for visits. There were a couple, of course, who are depicted in the musical as well, Nick and Diane. They met on the flight. They were the plane people,
Oh,
and they
wow.
ended up getting married and coming back and honeymooning in Newfoundland. They've been back several times, and yeah, we've really forged some friendships with various people.
So for you though, what an extraordinary second day on the job. How do you go about covering this when you're very inexperienced yourself as a journo?
You do your best. You sit down and you try to figure out what story you want to tell, because everyone, of course, had a story at the time. Ours are being told now through a musical, and we didn't even know we had a story. But it's just, with compassion and trying to be as polite as you can, because everyone is dealing in their own way with the situation and the turmoil that they were experiencing at the time. So, of course, it was just about, kind of going in there, soft kid gloves, and just asking people how they were feeling and if they wanted to talk.
So, Come From Away is the production that you're talking about, that this moment in time is about. Can you tell us about your personal connection to this theatre show?
So myself and my friend Brian Moser, who was doing the local cable show at the time in Gander, so he was helping tell, needed toilet paper at the Legion, or someone, down at the Lions Club is looking for fresh moose or whatnot. He was doing a lot of that. So the character is a culmination of both of us. So the name of the character is Janice Moser, and really kind of ties together some of the scenes, and is a reporter who's new on the job, and they're funny, they're just an integral part, I think, to the musical, and that's the great thing about the musical. I mean, it's a tragic story, and it does pay homage to all of that, and it's very sensitive musical when it comes to certain aspects, but it's also funny, and when you walk away, it's heartwarming. It makes you, appreciate humanity a little more and the kindness that was shown during that time.
There's some really beautiful characters in the show, and I know a lot of them are based on people that were there. What was the process? How were those characters formed and those stories discovered?
So the writers of the musical, David Hine and Irene Slankoff, they came to Gander for the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and they were students themselves at the time, going around talking to different people, finding out what everyone's story was, and they just kind of went away and sat down and wrote this fantastic piece of theater, and have culminated a bunch of different stories and a bunch of different experiences that people have, and that's what you see on stage.
So Come From Away has literally smashed all records in the box office. What do you think resonates with the audience?
I think it's the fact that during such a turmoil, tragic time in the world, everyone was impacted, of course. There was kindness still being shown, and there was some humanity, and just people opening their doors literally and their hearts to those who came, and those who needed help. And I think it's just a story that we really resonate with, and we just would hope that if something so tragic would happen again, that the same thing would happen, and more people would do the same as the people of Gander and surrounding areas did that day.
What has Gander been like since this happened? Has it changed the town?
Well, the town's gotten a little bit busier, a little more famous. More people want to come to town and kind of tour and look around. So we're seeing a few more tourists from that aspect of things. But no, I don't think it's changed the people, because at the same time, we don't think we did anything extraordinary. We just did what had to be done at the time. And we would do it again tomorrow if that was something that happened again.
Do you remember some of the people that you spoke with? Are they still in your heart?
Absolutely. Yeah, there was one person that I can remember speaking to vividly, and she had some loved ones that she wasn't sure where they were at the time. As you can, appreciate as well, it was 20 odd years ago, so cell phones weren't like they are today. You couldn't text somebody and wait for a message back. I mean, it just wasn't, technology wasn't like that. And so this lady she wasn't sure where her family member had been, and so she was crying and telling me the story, and of course I just went outside afterwards and sat in my car and cried, because it was just, you're emotionally involved. There's just no way that you couldn't be.
Now I watched the trailer because I haven't watched the show like Joe, so I'm really looking forward to it, because it is coming to Melbourne soon, so we can talk about that in a minute. But I watched the trailer and it said, we honour what was lost, but we also commemorate what was found. And I think that really sort of stands for what 9/11 was about as a global community, and obviously what happened in Gander. But what do you think you personally found in that time?
I think that's a hard one to kind of say, because I was so young and so new, and didn't really realize or appreciate, I guess, the experience I was having at the time. And it wasn't till afterwards that I stood back and kind of reflected, and even years later, and look back on it now and think, wow, like, I was in the right place at the wrong time. It was just something that kind of, you hope that more people would do the same thing if it did happen again, and more people would be willing to help their fellow man.
I think you were in the right place at the
Yeah,
right time, not
same.
the wrong time. I mean, there's something special about Gander, right?
Oh, absolutely. There's something special about Newfoundland and Labrador in general, and we've always been a province that reaches out and helps your neighbor because that's how we survived for so long. And like it's an island, like here in Australia, and I find even being here, there's a lot of similarity between Canada and Australia, and the way people are and how they treat each other, and it's so refreshing to be here.
The show is absolutely beautiful. It's come from away and it is hitting Melbourne in the next, I believe it's opening this week in Melbourne, and then I'm sure that it will be touring the country. I really loved it. Were you happy with the representation of you?
Absolutely. It was so funny the first time I saw it. And I mean, I wasn't sure what this musical was going to be and how it was going to be depicted. And to sit in the audience and to hear the words that I shared with David and Irene coming out of the actor's mouth, it was surreal. It was
It would
definitely
be
surreal.
very
Yeah,
surreal.
it would be.
Yeah, I'd be tempted to go, could you make me a little taller?
Well, they did make me blonde and a little smaller and skinnier. So,
Oh, congratulations. And thank you for sharing your story with the world. I'm really happy that, I mean, thank goodness that the writers discovered this story and shared it, right?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking an interest in it. And I hope that everybody gets the opportunity to go and see it and walks away feeling good at the end of the show.
Yeah. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm in a new stratosphere.
Well, you know, the power of capturing a person's incredible story comes in many forms. And so we go from the stage now to the small screen. And one of Australia's favourite TV shows in the last couple of years, I would say, Masterchef, which has brought some very beautiful stories, I think, with it.
It has. It's captured the nation, hasn't
It
it?
does. And I think food brings stories often, although in my family, we don't have a signature dish and we don't have,
what?
well, tuna casserole.
I'll have to share. I'll have to share.
I don't know. I didn't grow up with that beautiful food tradition because we're just, bogans from suburban Australia.
You might not want my traditional dishes of wombat and wombat stew and kangaroo.
I would love
You would
that.
love that. But my
Why?
husband has this beautiful dish where he's Hungarian, so paprika chicken is so delicious. So I'll have to cook it for you one day.
You see, this is like, I don't know, there's a real dearth of that sort of food tradition when you grow up in the kind of very, like I say, suburban bogan Australia. Where our
Nothing wrong with the tuna casserole.
oh my gosh, I love and everything in it is tinned.
Even
Pretty
better. Oh, we don't tell Melissa.
No, that's right. So we do need to welcome, I think she's in large part one of the reasons why MasterChef has absolutely taken off. We love it. She's food writer and MasterChef judge, Melissa Leong. Hi, Melissa.
Hello. I love a tuna casserole. Can I just say?
Same.
Oh, I'm really relieved to hear you say that because I must say, ever since like the very first series of MasterChef, it has always been my long-held desire to have that food tradition, and it's just not our culture, unfortunately.
You've got one.
Well, I think Andy also apologises a lot for sort of not having sort of this multicultural kind of, super foodie kind of family. But look at, what he does for work now and what he celebrates every single day. I think it's something that we evolve as we're interested and we share that love of it. So just because you weren't born into a super food family doesn't mean you can't celebrate food as you love it and you learn it, I think.
Yeah.
So true.
I mean, I'm sort of learning it with my daughter. She's 13. And so, we really enjoy exploring flavours. And I have a very bland palate, but I'm getting better.
Yeah, I've got
I
a
always
son.
say to my partner's kids, as long as you try it, if you don't love it, it's fine. But thank you for trying it and keeping an open mind.
lovely.
And
Yes.
so it's just continually just leaving the door open just a little crack, just in case you might like something later.
I've got the opposite. I've got a 16-year-old son who, after COVID, just strolled out of his bedroom, which I think that's where they all were, strolled out of his bedroom and said, I've been watching cooking videos, step aside.
Oh!
And now he's literally cooking restaurant quality food, and I'm just loving it. He goes, you're a terrible cook, Mum.
What a result.
It's
Of all
a
the
great
different
result.
permutations. That's
Yes.
great.
So straight to the shops, everything cooking utensils,
Wow.
he has it all, and we're not allowed to touch them. I'm happy.
Amazing. Is there any particular style of food that he's into cooking?
He loves, like yourself, the butter in the steak, like cooking lots of butter. There's all types of 3 different types of butters go into it that I didn't even know existed. And scallops with butter as well. So butter's taken a turn.
He's got quite the expensive taste.
And he doesn't eat scallops, so it's all for me. So
Oh, that's lovely.
It's that beautiful thing where he doesn't have to pay for it yet.
Yes.
No,
He's not
welcome,
silly.
Mum.
So, Mel, I know that one of your mottos going by your website is that you'll try anything once, which I
Yes.
really love as a philosophy for life, right? You just go, yes, just yes.
Just yes, give things a go and be. Again, I've always been taught to be open-minded, and I think it's just in my nature to be curious. And I would rather try something and know what it's like and just put that in the bank of memories. And it might not be my favorite thing that I've ever had, but at least I can kind of file it away and put it into context. And at the very least, there's a cool story involved. Right?
No regrets, just in general.
No regrets. Never. I mean, no. I think I'd rather try it than wonder. And I think that that's just my the way I live my life in general.
I agree.
I really enjoy your work on MasterChef because of this beautiful emotional connection that you have with the contestants. It feels like you draw out this real sense of their story. Is that something that you naturally do, that you recognise story in people?
Those are some really great facial expressions.
I love it.
All the bits where I am crying and people are like, you're such a pretty cry. I'm like, no, they always cry before I go full blown ugly cry. But empathy is something that I feel connected to people when I investigate how they're feeling, what's going on for them, what their stories are. And it's the great privilege of my job as a journalist to have done that over the years through the stories that food can tell us about people. And so what I do on the show is just a beautiful extension of that. It gives me more of an opportunity to kind of explore food with people and therefore their stories, their culture, and that maintains as one of the great privileges of my life.
Oh, beautiful. Now, you've touched on it a little bit there, but I'm wondering at what age food captured your imagination and what was it about it that you loved?
I think it's always been part of who I am. Food has always been really important in my family. I grew up being in and around the kitchen, watching Mum cook and sort of just slowly absorbing things by osmosis. And, you know, as little kids sort of tend to do, ask irritating questions about what's that and how do I do that and how can I help? And so slowly Mum would co-opt me into mixing things and, you know, squishing things and helping to kind of, you know, grind things up. And so as I sort of got a little bit older, I would, you know, be adding to that kind of toolkit of sensory experiences when it comes to food. So food's always been very important to me, and I think I always maintain it's my family's love language, even if we can't agree on whether or not I should be an accountant or a television presenter. We always agree on what to eat after we, you know, resolve that discussion or set it aside for later.
Isn't that interesting that you say that, in that, you know, you're clearly a very strong independent woman living an adult life, and yet our parents' influence never leaves us.
I know.
It's always there, that voice, isn't it?
Absolutely. There's always that, you know, what would they have wanted? And I think ultimately my parents, I love to sort of joke about the whole trope of, you know, migrant families and you know, parents especially, what they hope for their children. I think what any parent hopes for their child is for them to find their place in the world, be happy, feel secure, and traditionally you know, that's meant something like being an accountant or a lawyer or a doctor. But it's okay, my brother is about to graduate as a doctor, so
That takes the pressure off.
and they're just pretty happy as long as I've found my place in the world. And as unexpected as it was to be here, here I am and doing okay. Still attempting the adult thing. It hasn't fallen over flat just yet. So we'll just keep faking it till we make it.
I mean, I will say you've done a lot of different things. Like you've had a crack at like 3 or 4 different careers. Not, and I don't mean have a crack as in you've failed. You've had actually 3 or 4 careers. But you've done so much.
Yeah, it's funny how it all makes sense now because all of those different facets of what I tried on and what I threw myself into all applies to what I do now. So whether or not it was sort of, I was mentioning earlier when we were chatting that I learned how to be a makeup artist when I was in my late teens as I was studying economics. I was also a makeup artist, and had I not have done that part of my life the way that I did it, I wouldn't know how to do what I can do now. And if I'm on location, I was in Kings Canyon and Uluru a couple of weeks ago for a travel story that was being filmed. And there's no hair and makeup artist out there. If you can't turn up looking the way that you're comfortable looking for the rest of then you better know how to brush your hair. And
I would look like a hot mess if I had to be filmed.
Well, it's funny. I know how to do it too, and I think Melissa, we were talking off camera that you have to know because that diversity and that makeup artists aren't quite ready for us, unfortunately, in some places. So we do have to make sure that we know how to make ourselves look beautiful for camera.
That's right. I think my entire life, what the unifying thread through all of my experiences has been that I want to represent myself as faithfully as possible. I want to be very clear about who I am on every single platform. And if knowing how I want to look as well as how I want to sound and how I want to be remembered is sort of taken into consideration, then, you need to take that power into yourself and present yourself in the way that you can live.
Yeah, I love that conversation around the diversity of Masterchef. I think that as a series, it has done so much for Australia through the lens of food in making television in Australia less white. I just love, I've seen, over the decade, I mean, it's been now, I don't know how many years.
I feel like it's a decade.
More, perhaps, because I remember I was on Breakfast Radio when it first started. So that was 15 years ago. But, we've seen that sort of, evolution. And now in this last series, just such incredible diversity of people and cultures. Did it feel profound to you in that way?
You're right. Since day one, Masterchef in Australia has been a celebration of multicultural Australia, all of the different places that we come from. And now increasingly also a celebration of the bounty of incredible things that come from the land that we stand on, the land that we're so fortunate to be on. So it's a really wonderful thing. Every single day is a little bit different, and we discover new things about ourselves and the people in the room, and we get to talk about that to a global audience because, of course, MasterChef Australia is tremendously successful overseas as well, and so it's a great bastion of everything that we are collectively as a nation. So it does mean a lot, and it is an incredibly special thing to be a part of. And I think what has resonated so much with me is the feedback from me being in that in that judge's seat with Jock and Andy. My perspective lends perhaps a different perspective to before, and I think that's a wonderful thing. And when our turn's over and the next judges come through, they will provide different perspectives, and that will change again. And I think that's the wonderful thing about the subjectivity of food and our collective lived-in experiences and how we share them with each other.
It's like she's speaking my language. It's so wonderful to hear that. So, and it means so much as someone from the Aboriginal community and friends from diverse communities. I know what it means to them, so it's just so beautiful. And I'm sure you've heard the stories and people coming up to you in the street, because we can't help ourselves when we see gorgeous people like yourself. But I want to touch on butter. When I looked you up, I looked you up and I was going over it. I was like, this woman's like, seriously, like in the Aboriginal community, butter is like our thing too. We put it on absolutely everything. It's all over the place. It's thick. You can see it. There's no hiding that we've got butter on everything. It just makes food taste better, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Butter is such an incredible ingredient. It's something that I get tremendously nervous about running out of. There are certain things I can't live without in my pantry, in my kitchen. Butter, garlic, and spices are the things that, are always around. And so, yeah, butter is the ultimate flavor enhancer. It's a great way to finish a sauce. It's a great way to enhance the richness of a cake. It just has so many applications, and really good quality butter is it's just such a gift.
Yes,
I have learned that.
I'm a big fan of butter myself. That's why I buy hot cross buns, basically,
Yeah.
so I can put a lot of butter on.
Lots.
Preaching to the converted here. I mean, hot cross bun is just a vehicle for butter. So it's how much can you load on, and it's the optimum sort of temperature of that hot cross bun to kind of get the butter to be a liquid but also a solid.
Oh, yes.
So it's
Yeah, you're quite the
tiny
connoisseur, I can
sprinkle of
tell.
salt on top. Perfect.
So, I mean, I love even the recipes on your website, Melissa. My favourite being super fast apple crumble for one, which I live with two people who insist on eating my food, and it really shits me, right? So I am going to wait till I am home alone, and I'm going to cook the super fast apple crumble for one, and I'm going to eat that by myself. What is? What's your go-to food for when you feel miserable?
Oh, it really changes. It depends on my mood. At the moment, it's definitely some kind of chicken curry, sort of in a more Southeast Asian style. My parents are from Singapore, so sort of a more Malay or Nonya style chicken curry. And I almost always have all of the ingredients for that in my freezer and my fridge and my pantry ready to go. So there's something, I think, about warming, comforting foods that when you're feeling a little bit down, it sort of just gives you a bit of a hug. And I think it's always good to have those on hand.
Love it. Well, you're about to launch a book. And I love this. It's called A Taste Adventure, and it's a kid's book.
Yes, absolutely. Here's what I prepared earlier.
Oh,
I'm
it's
so excited.
beautiful.
I've co-written a lot of books with chefs over the years, but actually having my name and my name only on the front cover of something is such an exciting moment for me. As a journo, I still never tire of seeing my name in print. More so than even seeing myself on television, for example. I love seeing my byline.
I think because it's a lot more work. There is blood, sweat, and tears to words on a page, right?
And it's there forever. I mean, so is television, but honestly, it's there forever. And I value the written words so much, and so when it's in print, it's there in a way that feels more permanent to me, and therefore I think it really matters. So yeah, the book is a great achievement, and it was so much fun to write. I didn't know that I had a rhyming book in me. That's not how I review restaurants, as much as I like to put quite a few food puns in there. It was a really great exercise in a different style of writing, but still communicating a joy of food.
What is it about?
What is it about? Okay, well, it's aimed at sort of kids around I think 5 to 8, 5 to 9 kind of age group, and it's really just explaining the 6 sensations of taste: so sweet, sour, salty, bitter, spicy, and umami. And I sort of pitched this idea, and I thought, oh, that's really easy. And then I sat down and thought to myself, how do you explain what salty is to a 6-year-old?
Yes,
Nice.
That is not actually very easy. And so I then had to sit down and go, okay, well, I've pitched the idea and it's been approved, so I've got to do it now. And I just sort of thought, well, my goddaughter is, 8, nearly 9 years old, and her brother is a year or two older than that. And they come from a restaurant family, a hospitality family. And I just sort of thought about what we do when we sit around the table and we share food, and the way we communicate and explain to each other what the sensations are that we're feeling. And I just sort of used that as a jumping off point to sort of start explaining it. So there's a lot of simile and metaphor, and just sort of common experiences that we may have had. What it's like to go to the beach and get dumped by a wave and cop a mouthful of salt water. So using those childhood experiences, and then sort of making food a relevant part of that remembered experience is the way that I approached it.
Now, I've got 5 of those tastes under control, but umami.
Yeah.
Can you explain to me, as a 50-year-old, pretend I'm 8 and tell me umami? Because sometimes I act like I'm 8, so it's perfect.
It's like that really great Reddit, tell me like I'm 5. And I think that if you can't explain it like you're 5, or to someone that's 5, then you really need to rethink it. So umami is a sensation of deep, savoury quality. So it's best expressed in tomatoes, Parmesan cheese, miso paste, Vegemite. It has that really round, savoury kind of flavour without there necessarily being meat involved. And so the way I would describe it to a kid is that it's round and it's deep, and it feels meaty.
That's actually one of my favourite tastes. All this time I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing that I think all humans tend to seek, even if we don't know why we want that extra grating of Parmesan or why, roasted tomatoes have that extra kind of rich oomph to them when you eat them, when they're still a little bit squishy on the inside, but they have that beautiful caramelized burnish exterior. And when they explode, when you chew them, that release of a sensation of flavour is in part because of umami. So,
oh man, I mean, yeah, I return to my bland palate, and and I say that those flavours are what I grew up with, but we didn't know a label for it.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you know food, good food. I think we all
No, I
do.
can't express it as well as you can.
No, that's
because now
right.
I feel like roasted tomatoes.
Oh, yes, please. Mel, thanks so much. I just absolutely love seeing such a strong woman on our, commercial TV and prime time, and you unapologetically so, with your most glorious style. Just your fashion is so beautiful. And I know it's not easy necessarily to be a strong woman in that environment.
No, definitely not. It can have its challenges, but as we all know, having you guys have been in the media for a really long time, and you've broken your own barriers and your own molds as well. But we're all doing it together. There's a cumulative effect to every woman who stands up, every woman who is proud of their voice and lifts other people up, which is what you do, through this program. And it's really nice to feel a part of something. I not for one second ever feel alone in doing what I do, which is a really
Oh, gosh.
I love that. I'm so glad. We are there with you side by
Absolutely.
side, tasting the dish, loving what you're wearing, and loving the way you express yourself and who you are. Thanks so much, Mel. It's been lovely to have you on the show.
Shelley, it's
Absolute
been
pleasure.
lovely to meet you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Bye.
Whenever we're apart, we miss each other so much. So, please accept this daily dog as a sign of my love for you.
Broad Radio. Talking inspo we love, info we need, and sharing more of us. Watch and listen live every Tuesday 9 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time at broadradio.com.au, or find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn at Broad Radio Oz. Talk to us live. Call on 1300 8 Broad. Catch up on demand anytime, anywhere, every time, everywhere. On the train, we'll be here. 2 a.m. existential crisis, we've got you covered. Broad Radio. Here for more.
Now, Shelley, before we get to our next guest, who I'm looking forward to asking her about the 6 sensations of taste, I wanted to ask you about your podcast series that has just launched for Gene House for Women's Health and for Women's Health Week. Tell us about it.
Well, I'm really lucky. I've been a Jean Hales for Women's Health Week ambassador for, I think it's about 7 years now. So it's where I've learned a lot about myself as a woman, and they just are these amazing people that have such a wealth of knowledge of all of the things that have been happening with women that you can go to a doctor quite often and then they don't want to talk about it. So I was lucky enough to be asked to do the podcast series, and Fighting the Shame is the first of the podcasts, and it is an incredible story, and there are 10 other incredible stories as well that you get to share in the different experiences that women have had along the way with their own health, doctors not listening or them more listening to their own body and saying, I know something's wrong, I need help with this, and pushing through.
Amazing. So this first episode is with Kath Matsella, who is a real advocate for gynecological cancer.
Yeah, so Kath had vulva cancer. Vulval? Is that
Vulva,
right? I
yeah.
did say that right.
Oh,
Yep,
vulval, yes, vulval.
So she's talking about what it's like in this podcast about the shame that has come with people saying, oh, what about your sex life? Can your husband, can you still have sex? Because she had to have so much removed. And there was a big moment where she knew that sex was going to be different from that moment. So it was about her healing journey and sharing that story so it empowers women. And I mean, I didn't even know it was a thing that you could get cancer there.
Well, was someone said to me once, wherever there are cells in the body, you can get cancer, right? So of course it makes sense.
It makes sense, but I don't think we've ever spoken about it. So it was so wonderful to be able to sit down and talk to Kath. And as a byproduct of that, she's actually created her own day. Apparently you can create your own days, she tells us. So it's called Red Knickers Day, and it's actually this year on the 10th of September, where you can support her in spreading this message to women so that they understand if there are lumps and bumps that aren't meant to be there, then you need to go and get yourself checked out.
It relies on you being very familiar with your body.
That's right.
And all parts of your body, which again I think related to shame.
Yes.
We feel like we're not entitled to explore our own body sometimes.
Yes. And I had that conversation with a girlfriend only last week when she was talking about, what it's like to talk to her teenage daughter about sex. And she said it should be in schools where they talk about a girl should know their own body. It should be a comfortable conversation where you talk about touching your own body, knowing your own body. And she said it's still not happening today. So it's great that we're talking about it because people need to know their own body, male, female. Everybody needs to know what's going on.
I mean, it's a part of that very traditional, I guess, we're essentially a Christian country, right? Like most of us don't follow that and aren't from that particular religious sort of background necessarily anymore, but that's still so pervasive in the way we see ourselves. Yeah. And apparently there's, shame associated with loving your body, liking the feeling of touching your own body, the pleasure that you get from your own body, all these things that as we grew up, some of us had parents that weren't really into that, and even if our parents were saying no, that's okay, society was saying it's not okay.
100% society was saying that. I remember at home, my parents were very much, in the old days, I call it, because I'm from the 1970s and 80s.
You and me both, sister.
There was a series of weekly books that you could get about the joys of sex. My parents got that. It was like this manual, and it would come every week. So we were quite open in our house, but outside you couldn't be. Nobody was talking about it. I went to a Catholic school. Oh, imagine if I rocked that little
if you brought that
weekly episode out.
Oh my God.
I probably wouldn't have ended my schooling career there. But, we are getting better, but it's still not good enough. And the fact that we can have these conversations on podcasts like this and here on this podcast are really valuable for women to know. It's okay to touch your body, to know your body, and when something's not right, to reach out.
Well, I think Kath's extraordinarily, she's courageous because imagine fronting up to your doctor and saying, I feel something's not right down there. Yeah. That would be very hard.
Very, very hard.
And then to speak so openly about it.
I know. And if you have a doctor that doesn't listen, because recently I popped into my local doctor and wanted to talk about some gynecological health, and I think he put an imprint in the back wall. I think I've spoken about him before on this show. So when he jumped back and his hands went up like that, I went, I'm in the wrong place. So you can head to Jean Hales. They do consults over Zoom, or they did during lockdown. But they're long consults. So you're not rushing in for that 5 minutes. It's a long consult. They have 40, 50 years of medical experience behind them, and it's all about listening to women and women's bodies.
What I love is your instinct was, I'm in the wrong place. Listen to that instinct and feel entitled to go, yep, I'm going to go to the right place. Wonderful. Absolutely love it. Check out the podcast. It's called
It's just a podcast series.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not sure yet because Fighting the Shame's the first one.
Okay.
So I haven't been privy to are they all coming
That's
out yet.
okay.
So there's
well,
10. Keep an eye out on
that's
Insta.
right. Head
Yeah.
along to Jean House for Women's Health. They'll have the link there on their website as well. Let's get to our final guest for today, and I'm looking forward to it because I need the help. I don't know about you, but my daughter is 13, and I always thought when she hit, an age at which I could actually reason with her, then food would become easier, but it actually has not. We're still in this endless conversations of how to get healthy food into her and more food and nutritious food. So here is someone to help, Bel Smith and her social enterprise, The Root Cause, all about helping kids make better food choices. Hi there, Bel.
Hello, Joe and Shelley. What a fascinating conversation. I'm coming from the black and white days, as my kids tell me. I'm now 53, so I resonate with a lot that you've spoken about today.
Yes, so it's we all have very common experiences. For me, this teenager who won't eat, is that a common experience? I mean, she eats, but just so sporadically, and I don't feel like enough. Sometimes I'm like, how are you even growing?
This is a fascinating conversation, and I have to say I love that we've come off the back of Mel's chat because she's all about the joy of food, and quite honestly, a lot of the women that I talk to find food so frustrating, like whether their kids are 2, 5, 6, 13, 16, they're all at different places and food can feel challenging, frustrating. Sometimes it's even a nuisance. So, Joe, to answer your question, yes, like for 13-year-old girls particularly, food can be very, very strange. And one of the things I encourage every parent to do, regardless of the age of our kids, is to try to neutralise food, like rather than healthy or unhealthy or good or bad or junk and labelling it, that we actually talk about food and the connection to our body and how it makes us feel. Because labels, well, it's kind of like anything that gets given a label, it gets put in a box. And, we grow and change. That's why some, like today, they like bananas and tomorrow they won't, like things change. And so trying to neutralise the discussion around food from healthy, because, typically kids hear healthy and they think yuck. Just removing the labels can be a big thing.
That's a good tip.
It is a very good tip.
Neutralising. My son liked bananas when we had a banana shortage when you said that, and they were $20 each, and he ate 3 a day. I've never been so poor in my life. It was the only thing he was eating, though.
He has very expensive tastes, your son.
Shocker. If it's $20 each, he'll have it.
But what foods are the worst to give our kids? If we know that they need food for fuel and for growing and for thinking and all those things, what are the worst foods that we want to try and avoid?
Look, it's actually very complicated in today's world because our supermarkets are jammed packed with foods that really don't help our body, which is why you quite often, when you talk to people like me, we say shop around the edges because that's typically the least processed. And,
you mean in the supermarket you want to stay on the edges rather than where the shelves are in the middle?
Oh, that's
true.
true.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of the shelves in the middle are like when we're talking to children, we talk about foods that help our body, foods that don't help our body. Typically the foods grown in nature are on the outside of the supermarket and they help your body. And the foods that are in the centre of the supermarket tend to start in a chemistry lab, get made in a factory, and they really don't, offer much support for our body. So trying to steer clear of those. Now, we know from a study that was done, I think it was 2018, that 57% of our shopping trolleys are now the foods that are in the centre of our supermarket, of the supermarkets, which are the foods that aren't helping our body, which is part of the reason why we're seeing issues with children's health. So generally try to stick to those outside edges at the supermarket and you would be doing, the best thing for your children's health.
That's so true. When you think about your supermarket and the layout, it is down there on the outside, isn't it? So what are some of the issues that we're seeing with health with children that are eating a lot of processed food?
Look, the statistics for children's health aren't that great. 43% of our children now have at least one chronic health condition. We spoke earlier today, we were talking about in the sessions about mental health like Liptember. For our own kids, they're now 25% of primary age children are feeling high levels of anxiety daily. So that's not great. We've got 10 to 16% of our kids have learning difficulties. 25% of children are now overweight or obese, and there's a lot of follow-on conditions that happen with that, like diabetes type 2. Used to be adult onset, but children are now getting it, high blood pressure, heart conditions. So these are all things that, once upon a time, it was only like when you got to your 50s and 60s and life caught up with you, but now it's catching up with our kids at such a young age.
That's so alarming, isn't it?
It is.
And does that really come down to our diet?
There's lots of scientific studies that are now linking food to all manner of conditions in our body, but it's clearly not the sole thing. Health is many faceted, so movement of your body is one thing, the amount of time that we're spending on screens, our mental health, like, what sort of thoughts are we fueling our mind with? But generally speaking, they say that 80% of our health comes from what we put in our mouth. And I just listened to a talk by Professor Felice Jacka from Melbourne's Food and Mood Centre recently. It was titled Diet and Depression. So if anyone has people that are, feeling mental health issues, it's a great talk to watch, because even though she's like a scientist and like the way she articulates is so simple to understand. And I think one of my favourite lines from her talk was, you just need to be careful of what you put in your gob. So, it is. So, one of the things I love to encourage people to do is just ask the question, what's in my food? So and if sorry, you go.
No, you go.
Like what's in my food, like if you think of an apple or a carrot, you don't have to do a lot of investigating to know that it's grown in nature and it helps our body. But something that's in a packet, like you do need to turn it around, like ignore what's on the front, because that's just marketing BS, and call that straight. Like there's so many foods out there, like children and parents get fooled by things that say fruit snacks on the front, and they think it's fruit. And you turn it around and you look at the ingredients and there's next to no fruit in it. So just what's in my food, and it really can be quite profound, because you'll start to see, like disodium 5-ribonucleotides. I remember that because that was in something. Exactly. It's like a chemistry lab.
I think I sent my
calcium
son to
propionate.
I think I might have sent my son to school with some of those today. So as a bad mother who can often be quite busy, what are some tips for busy parents about creating wonderful lunch boxes for our children?
Well, great question. The first thing I'd actually say is I'd love to go back to that whole thing about labelling. I would love parents to, avoid the thought of labelling themselves as, good, bad, guilty, whatever. We all get mum guilt, like terribly. I mean, I remember when I first started learning about this, it was off the back of my husband being diagnosed with postnatal depression. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've been feeding my family these foods that have been, potentially contributing to the state of their health. And I was really like beating up on myself. But I always like to think, you do the best with the time, money, and the knowledge that you have. And like Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you can do better. So regardless of what you've been doing, it's just for now, okay, let's just start asking what's in my food. So going back to disodium 5-ribonucleotides, that is a very, very common ingredient in flavoured packet foods. So going from, I guess what Mel was talking about, that would kind of be like your savoury, kind of chemically concocted savoury flavour that gets put into it. But it's commonly linked to learning difficulties, behavioural issues, asthma, eczema, even sleep disturbances for some kids, which is my son. He gets affected when he has it. So it's just switching to plain crackers or plain chips. You know, if you are too busy to cook it at home yourself, just making that simple swap, go from flavoured to plain, and you can start to eliminate some of those things that are a bit more chemically based for our bodies.
That's so interesting you say that too, okay, so I'm forming a theory, which always is alarming because it's based on no knowledge.
Give it a go. Give it a go.
The theory I'm forming is going off what Mel was talking about, the umami, and that how it's very enriching and we crave it, right? So are there ways of fulfilling that craving for that sort of savoury flavour that's natural? So say our kids, and this is a bit of a fantasy because I would say to my daughter, have some fruit, and she'd be like, roll her eyes and say, no thanks. But do we want to try and replace the chemical with something natural that also fulfills that craving?
Well, what's actually really interesting is that there are studies that actually show when you progressively make small changes to shift your palate, that your palate actually changes along with it. Like, so today there's something like 80% of our foods have added sugar included in. So all of a sudden we've actually now started to want to eat either like sugary foods or salty foods or fatty foods, because that's predominantly of what we eat. And there's, studies that show what happens in our gut, like our bacteria in our gut starts to crave those foods, even though those foods are typically the foods that take away from our health. And so we need to start to slowly, I call it add in and crowd out. So you give them what they want, the salty, sugary, flavoury foods, and then you add in little bits of what you want them to have, and eventually you change the mix. So I'll give everyone a couple of practical examples that I did myself going back, this is like 10 years ago now. But barbecue shapes, they're heavily flavoured and very addictive. I mean, they really are a bit like
quite delicious.
Exactly. There's a reason why foods like that and what are they? You can't stop until you pop. What are those?
Pringles, yeah, delicious, sure.
That's right. Like once you start, like that kind of thing. So I would open those bags and put 90% of the barbecue shapes in the lunchbox, and then I would add in a mix of the like the crackers that I wanted. Back then it was
in the bag.
I take them out of the bag.
Oh yeah.
Put it into the lunchbox.
Oh yeah.
So that they have a little, a mix, and then over time I would reduce the amount of barbecue shapes and increase what I want. And you can take. I mean, everybody knows their kids better than any doctor or anybody else. Take however long it takes. It could be 6 weeks, could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. And you can apply this methodology with everything. I did it like going from when we discovered my husband was impacted by gluten, I went right into rice. Okay, let's replace pasta with rice, And then I discovered white rice was linked to diabetes, and that's on both sides of my family. So I had to start to transition to brown rice. So again, 90% white rice, 10% white, brown, and then transitioning. Just transitioning.
What I love is I'm hearing that you don't need to be defeated. Like, there are ways but just to be kind to yourself and take the time that you need. We have to wrap up because we're over time. As always, amazing conversation. But I do love the fact that you brought up mum guilt there. Notice it's never dad guilt.
No.
I've never heard my husband feel guilty about anything.
No, now that you mentioned it.
We're so harsh on ourselves, aren't we, Bel?
We do. We carry both the physical and the mental load in the home, and it's the mental load that actually keeps us up at night. And it's actually the part of the load that we need to get our partners to take on, and our kids. That's why we love to empower our kids to do these things too.
It's true. I love that. Yeah, why do we have to carry it all? You have an amazing book that you can get at your website, therootcause.com.au, The Lunchbox Effect, which is really powerful. There's some amazing programs there that the schools and parents can get involved with as well, which really empowers you to empower your children. Like, we want the kids to take on all of this for themselves.
Yeah. And I think as my son's gotten older, he's wanted to be empowered. He's making those decisions.
Well, you're living with a cordon bleu chef now, it seems.
I'm one lucky woman.
You know, Shelley, I'll just wrap up with that saying how perfect that is as an example, because a lot of mums, the biggest thing that I hear is, I don't have time for this. But when we step back and we allow our kids to step in, we actually buy back our time.
Yes.
You know, like, so we invest a little bit of time in teaching them to do things, and then you step back and then, you know, like all of a sudden you've got an extra couple of hours a week because they're cooking. So spend a little bit of time and you make time.
Oh, love it. I love the work that you do, Bel. It's amazing. I know that you're really passionate about, you know, empowering our kids and helping them have a happy, healthier future because of their food choices. It's really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Thanks, Bel. Take care. And Shell,
what a show.
It's been lovely to have you.
It's been wonderful. I've loved it. Thanks
as
for having
always.
me.
You've really lifted me up, so I really appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah. We will be back with Broad Radio next Tuesday. In the meantime, have a fantastic week and, look after yourselves.
Been together so long we can't pretend. Remember the way we used to move, dance all night like young lovers do.